People with autism don't want social relationships with others. That's just one of the many myths surrounding the autism spectrum disorder. Another persistent myth is that autism is caused by the parent's upbringing or actions. Both myths are completely false. In this video, we will address 5 of the most common myths about autism and debunk them with facts.
I've worked with individuals diagnosed within the autism spectrum for over 2 decades. The myths we're addressing here are some that I frequently encounter when people ask about my work. Before we dive into the myths, let's briefly review what autism actually is. Autism is a spectrum, meaning there are many degrees of autism. Simply put, at one end of the spectrum, we have classic autism, which is often accompanied by intellectual disability to varying degrees. At the other end, we have Asperger syndrome, where individuals typically have normal or high intelligence. Both forms of autism, classic autism and Asperger syndrome, present similar challenges in terms of social interaction, communication, and imagination. These 3 challenges are known as the autistic triad. The challenges in the autistic triad are common to everyone with an autism spectrum diagnosis, but the degree of difficulty in each field varies greatly. Some individuals may have severe communication problems but fewer issues in social areas. For others on the spectrum, it may be the opposite or different altogether. However, everyone must have a degree of difficulty in all 3 areas to receive the diagnosis. This means that the overall degree of difficulty for each person varies, ranging from needing help with almost everything to being able to function in normal society with very little or no assistance. One of the myths about autism is that it is a disease that can be cured. Let's clarify right away that autism is not a disease. It is a neurological developmental disorder that is an integral part of the person who has it. There is no cure for autism, but there are many ways to support and help people with autism live full and meaningful lives. As mentioned, some individuals may need extensive support, while others can manage with very little or no support. Some of the world's most successful people are diagnosed with autism or Asperger syndrome. For example, the world's richest man, Elon Musk, actor Anthony Hopkins, and actor Dan Aykroyd have all publicly shared their diagnoses. Additionally, there are many well-known successful people who are believed to be on the autism spectrum, though this hasn't been confirmed. This includes figures like Einstein, Steve Jobs, and Bill Gates. These success stories contribute to the next myth, that all people with autism are geniuses or have special talents. This is not the case. As mentioned earlier, many with classic autism have a lower-than-average intelligence and require extensive help. However, even among them, you can find special talents, although these are often not particularly useful or advantageous for independent living. Through my work, I know a young man who needs extensive help with everything. Nevertheless, he has a kind of photographic vision. The moment he enters a room, he can see if a small detail has changed from the usual arrangement. It could be a shoe that's out of place, a remote control that's been moved, or a cabinet door that's ajar. He needs to fix it before he can move on. This, of course, hinders him more than it helps. Other well-known people with special talents include the inspiration for Rain Man in the 1988 film of the same name. Laurence Kim Peek was an American savant who had an exceptional memory but also faced significant social challenges. Another example is Grandin. She is an American academic and animal behaviorist. She is one of the first autistic people to document the insights she gained from her personal experiences with autism. So, there are people diagnosed on the autism spectrum with quite remarkable abilities that can be useful, so to speak. But for many, these special talents are not very helpful in everyday life. However, there are efforts, for example in Denmark, to integrate people with autism into the workforce. It often turns out that many autistic individuals are highly detail-oriented and do not tire of repetitive tasks. They can therefore be very valuable employees where these skills are advantageous. A company called Specialisterne, the Specialists, has even specialized in helping people with autism diagnoses find employment. The challenge is often that the normal job market is geared towards generalists, neurotypical people who can do a bit of everything, whereas people with autism diagnoses are often very skilled in a narrower field. Next, we will address 2 myths. One is that people with autism do not desire social relationships, and the other is that people with autism have no empathy. Both are, of course, incorrect. It is true that many with autism seek their own company, but this usually stems from difficulties in engaging in social relationships. They have trouble reading social cues, unwritten rules, and nonverbal behaviors such as body language and tone of voice. Facial expressions and body language can be like a foreign language, incomprehensible to some. This means they often end up saying or doing inappropriate things or even becoming the subject of ridicule in social situations. Some may also be particularly sensitive to stimuli. For example, sounds, touches, or even just wearing clothes can be uncomfortable. And since social interactions usually require being dressed, and some social settings can be noisy, this can be a reason for their withdrawal. These limitations mean that some prefer their own company. But it does not mean that they do not desire social relationships. When it seems like people with autism lack empathy, it also stems from their difficulties in reading others. Imagine if a tearful face does not convey sadness to the person, but is just a strange facial expression with no meaning. It's hard to know that empathy is expected in such a situation. So, although it may seem like people with autism spectrum challenges do not seek social interaction or appear unempathic, this is not true. The problem may be that they cannot read others or are particularly sensitive to something in the environment. The last and very persistent myth we will address here is that autism is caused by parents' upbringing or style. The myth dates back to the 1940s when American psychiatrist Leo Kanner proposed the theory of refrigerator mothers. He noticed that many of the children he diagnosed with autism came from well-educated families. He assumed the mothers were emotionally cold and distant, which he believed could lead to autism. This theory was later popularized and expanded by psychoanalyst Bruno Bettelheim in the 1950s and 1960s. Bettelheim believed that a lack of maternal warmth and love could cause autism in children. He also used the term refrigerator mothers and wrote several books and articles supporting this idea. This myth has been particularly persistent and still lingers in some ways, despite modern research clearly debunking it. We now know that autism is a complex neurological developmental disorder with a strong genetic component and possible environmental factors that affect brain development. Parents' upbringing style or emotional attachment has no influence on the development of autism. That brings us to the end of this video. If it has given you new knowledge, entertainment, or been helpful in any way, please consider subscribing and liking. It will help the channel create more and even better videos.